In the previous slides, we discussed the trends and competencies of heroic leaders in both higher education and business settings that need to be sustained in the absence of that iconic leader. K-12 schools are microcosms of communities and are often known for being reflective of current trends. As school communities, we often subscribe to an idealized Hollywood-esque vision of school reform agent who can come along and motivate, engage teachers, staff, communities, and learners. We have the concept of a heroic, iconic leader who can swoop in with a well-timed motivational speech and then return to the office and hang up her cape. But what happens when that school leader moves on? Similar to business and higher education settings, it is up to the organization to adapt to a shared leadership vision that can sustain the values of the organization. What Gunter, Hall, and Bragg have found is that results of heroic leadership in K-12 school settings show indirect rather than direct effects of leadership on learning, meaning we cannot definitively and clearly contribute student achievement and success to the heroic leader. Rather, it is how the leader utilizes specific competencies and impacts other components within the building that ultimately can cause change and reform. Given the issues facing schools, Gunter, Hall, and Bragg further posit the job of leading schools is becoming too big for one person, and the idea of a heroic leader in schools is becoming problematized. External pressures from district and state contexts impact transition from heroic traditional leadership to distributed leadership because the idea of heroic traditional hierarchical leadership is not overwhelmingly addressing the needs for school reform. Copland found traditional heroic leaders are the exception, not the norm, and significant changes made in schools often dissolve after the leader has moved on to another organization or has left the field entirely, which further implies the necessity of utilizing a distributed leadership model that is less focused on a singular vision, but rather a shared vision that is articulated across a school community. As our group has presented, there are specific competencies that the organization needs to develop to shift from a heroic leader to a more distributed model. The role of the principal must be viewed as contextual or situational, meaning there will be instances when the principal may serve as both a transactional leader or a gatekeeper of distributed leadership, given the situation or context. Buildings must focus on a shared vision that includes highly social settings such as communities of practice and skillful, articulate participation of all stakeholders. It is also important to acknowledge that distributed leadership requires members to be highly social with regard to building trust and maintaining communication and openness. It is up to the leader to build capacity of the building members using sustainable competencies.